It's time to look at Pokémon sprites again. I'm returning to Generation 3 for the remakes of the Generation 1 games, FireRed and LeafGreen versions. After Ruby and Sapphire, a majority of the original 151 Pokémon got brand new sprites for their remake. Some Gen 1 Pokémon sprites were retained from the Hoenn games in FireRed and LeafGreen, but for the ones that did change, I'm going to analyze the weirdest ones. Unlike my previous videos on the weird sprites, I'm not only going to focus on abnormalities, but also aspects of them that raise a few questions. And with less Pokemon to look at than usual, I'm also including anything else that has a sprite in battle, including trainers and items. So let's break down the top 10 weirdest sprites in Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen. Number 10. Gengar. Gengar has always been sinister in appearance, but as time went on, his design softened up a bit and became more plushy friendly. Ruby and Sapphire gave him a taller, slightly slimmer model for his sprite, but FireRed tried to revert him back to the spooky shadow. Not only did he get more stout, but his face resembled that of his older artwork in this sprite. To a newcomer to the series, this face may seem out of place, since Gengar has not looked this maniacal since his Gen 1 artwork, but I love the rougher designs from the series takeoff, so this sprite is fantastic. This is the face of someone who could potentially mug you, yet he has the short body of someone who's just a little scamp. Luckily, the menacing stare and grin overrule his less than threatening stature. Number 9. Graveler. This sprite looks weird since Graveler is shaped like a meatloaf. Ruby and Sapphire, along with previous games, show his sprite core to be a rugged oval. However, here he got flattened a bit and looks almost like he should evolve into his Ruby and Sapphire sprite. Are Gravelers just naturally shorter in Kanto due to all the pollution? I guess we'll never know. And what's with that malicious look, Graveler? You're not an evil guy. You look like you want to cartoonishly steal some priceless jewels. Number 8. Lieutenant Serge, our first trainer sprite of the list, and it's a gym leader. The overall design of Lieutenant Serge is fine and goes along with the artwork. However, the only reason he's here is the pose. The way he's hunched over with his hand position makes it look like he's giggling as if he's a rambunctious little guy. Normally, Serge has a powerful pose that almost feels like it should intimidate, or at least get him confused with Guile. I can't quite put my finger on it, but the pose is like when someone takes a picture of you mid-action and it just looks weird for lack of a better term. Alternate idea? He could be dancing, so maybe this is just the latest rendition of the Serge Samba. Number 7. Wartortle. The most inconsistent thing about Wartortle is his color. In the anime, they regularly showed him as a purple turtle, or maybe a mauve turtle. Puce? However, the games and even the official artwork led to great confusion over Wartortle's color, and by great confusion, I meant minor issue that no one really cared about. The original artwork for Wartortle depicted him with blue skin, along with various official pieces of artwork that came afterwards. However, some widely distributed images were purple, so it seemed we were at a stalemate in color. Yet when the sprites had color in Gen 2, his skin was blue like the original artwork, and he had a somewhat purple shiny sprite, so it made the anime Wartortle seem like a rare breed. When Ruby and Sapphire came out, if you managed to get a Wartortle, you'd see he's a soothing ocean blue. If you wanted him to be purple, you would have to settle with the shiny. That is, until the Gen 1 remake. This premiered Wartortle's posh purple skin, and from that day forward, he was purple in every game, starting a new era for the race of turtles. The main weird thing about this sprite is the color change happened mid-generation. The explanation makes sense since FireRed and LeafGreen was when the official artwork was updated for the original 151 Pokemon. However, at the very least, it created a Mandela effect for me where I thought Wartortle was purple in everything before this game until I started looking back at all my old Pokemon stuff and thought, wait, when was he blue? They even changed his sprite color to purple and emerald version, where near every other sprite was identical to the Ruby and Sapphire ones, which added to my amnesia. Number 6. Tauros. Tauros looks disproportionate in this sprite. The main reason is his legs are shorter than they normally are in other sprites and artwork. artwork. Usually they're long enough to supposedly support someone of his size. I know, a riveting analysis. However, with him having such tiny legs, I can't see how they would be strong enough to keep him standing. My suspension of disbelief in this world of magic animals and living inanimate objects is totally broken now. Additionally, either his head is too small or the muscles around his neck are too big, since he looks like a muscle-bound character whose body got buff but whose head never grew. He's like Abigail in Street Fighter V, or the second Bane design in the DCAU. Number 5. RadekAid. RadekAid has never been the most attractive Pokemon, but Gen 3 was not kind to it at all. He was leaner in earlier generations and his official artwork, but in this game they made him a mangy fat little ball of fluff. I really don't want to touch that thing. How does he move around? The old RadekAid looks like he could at least waddle his way through a marathon. He had the body structure of a potato. But this new RadekAid looks like he would have to drag his body across the floor with those limbs. His Ruby and Sapphire sprite was slightly more thick, but he at least looked like he was more prepared for crawling. It's like he's trying to become a full sphere. Though RadekAid listened to his dietitian for Gen 4 and slimmed back down to his old stature for all games afterwards. Number 4. The Tamer Trainer Class. Nothing is particularly weird looking about this trainer class. The one thing that always confused me was the old-timey lollipop. Do Pokemon like high fructose corn syrup? Is that your secret, sir? But what always stood out about this trainer sprite is it was the only one in FireRed and Leafgreen that got to retain its whip when entering this new generation. Back in Gen 1, a vast array of trainers openly carried whips in their sprites. Not just your more corrupt trainers like Team Rocket Grunts, but your standard cool trainers too, along with some other trainer classes and even Gym Leader Sabrina. Once Gen 2 rolled around, no trainers were seen with whips, which I presume was to make Pokemon look less harsh and gritty and make it more about friendship. Even the first trainer in the anime to use a whip was berated by Ash. I have no idea why the Tamer was allowed to keep his whip in this game. Not even the former whip users from Gen 1 were allowed to bring back their whips for nostalgia's sake. Maybe it's because the Tamer is based on an actual animal tamer, some of which have traditionally used whips, but whatever the reason, the Tamer had no fear when presenting his whip to the censors. Number 3. Golbat. Game Freak is out on a mission to make Golbat either look horrifying or goofy. In Japanese Red and Green version and international Red and Blue version, that thing was the ultimate terror. It's wild and will give you rabies in exchange for your soul. Even the Ruby and Sapphire sprite looks angry enough to bite off one's head, but then you have the other Gen 3 sprite. The Gen 1 remakes took that sprite and vacuumed out all the intimidation. He almost looks the same, but he's at an angle that makes him look like a daydreamer. He seems like he's amazed at something slightly off to the left, yet bored by it at the same time. Or like he's going in for a hug with a family member he hardly ever sees but is not super close with. It most closely reminds me of his yellow version sprite, where he appears to have just been hit by a broom. At least he does not look as frail as his original artwork. That was the real stage setter for his unfortunate sprite situation. Okay team, if he doesn't look like this, he has to look like this. Number 2. Grimer. This sprite is the one that made me realize how soulless Grimer used to look. Modern depictions of it and most of its developed artwork show it looking like a normal, devious, yet jolly sludge monster. But the eyes on this sprite were just glossed over enough, just round enough to make it look like he's been traumatized in some manner. Maybe Grimer just had an existential crisis where he realized he's composed of sludge, or maybe he just learned what sludge is. That poor guy. The honorable mentions part of this video will be replaced with a segment I'm calling A Random Thing I Noticed. After looking at these sprites for a while, it appears that for any of the original 151 Pokemon that had a different sprite than they did in Ruby and Sapphire, their FireRed and Leafgreen sprite closely resembles their sprite in the original Japanese Red and Green versions. For example, Articuno had this sprite in Ruby and Sapphire and this sprite in FireRed and Leafgreen, which matches the pose in its first sprite. Lickitungue's tongue was changed to being in front of its body like the old sprite. Our buddy Wartortle had his pose updated to this pre-tackle stance like in the Red and Green sprite, and Machoke is flexing while on one knee like in olden days. I'm not gonna go through every comparison, but it made me think. There were a few outliers and sprites that were unchanged between Ruby and Fire Red that don't fit either, but I felt like it was an interesting observation. I'm either onto something or looking at still images for multiple hours has driven me mad. I would not be surprised if it were the latter. Okay, let's move on. Number 1 is a trainer sprite that never looked quite right to me, but that meant it was actually doing its job considering where they appear in-game and the circumstances of the story. Number 1, the Channeler Trainer Sprite. Based on a Shinto priestess, this trainer class only appears in the Pokemon Tower trying to rid the area of weary spirits. However, these ladies are possessed, causing a certain abnormality with their sprites. These trainers look like they just drank a gallon of coffee that may have been laced with LSD. Those eyes, they stare so deep into my soul that they can see through me. Also, with the mouth, it looks like they're perpetually going... Ooh! I do like the aesthetic better of the Gen 1 channelers, where they had this shadow around their eyes to represent their ghostly possession, but the Fire Red sprite still successfully portrays that all is not well with these trainers. I know the Marowak spirit mostly led to their somewhat freaky look and possession, but I blame their hypnotic state on all those darn Ghastlies hanging around these nice ladies.
Ghastly's a ladies' man, alright?
Actually, they tend to use female Ghastlies.
Ladies' man's lady, a man's lady.
On that note, this concludes that the Channeler has the weirdest sprite in Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green to me. So what did you think? Agree? Disagree? What sprites that were new to the Gen 1 remakes looked the weirdest to you? Since these games had less crazy sprites than the older games, let me know some of your favorite sprites from Fire Red and Leaf Green too. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.